Shanna Diederichs, and I'm just giving a quick update on Crow Canyon's current research initiative, which is the Basket Maker Communities Project. That study area is in southwest Colorado, so just 4 miles sort of northwest of Cortez, Colorado, so over that way. This is a pretty large, intensive research project. It's scheduled for 6 years. We're currently in the 4th year of the project, so it'll continue for the next couple of years. It's multifaceted, so it has involved surface survey, remote sensing, excavation, analysis of museum collections. So it's coming from quite a bit of different directions, but what I'm going to talk about today is some of our intensive excavations, and in particular a site called the Dillard Site. So this is a site we've been focusing on for the last 4 years, and the main purpose of that investigation and intensive work is because we have a Basket Maker 3 Gray Kiva. I know there's others out there in southwestern Colorado, but this is really the only one that has been excavated. So, you know, the Dillard site itself consists of that Gray Kiva, about 12 pit houses. So there's a cluster to the north, sort of a northern neighborhood and a southern neighborhood around it. The site is dating to the late 500s up to about 700 AD. So it's fairly early for the McElmo Dome. In fact, it seems to sort of predate the sweep of colonization of the McElmo Dome over there by about 40 years. So in some ways, you could think of the Dillard site as maybe a group of colonizers, sort of colonizing behavior, homesteading behavior up on the McElmo Dome. In particular, I'm going to talk about the Great Kiva because we are just coming to the end of excavations there. So this Great Kiva is about 11.5 meters in diameter. It's a 4-post support system. There's a beautiful bench ringing the outside, some masonry incorporated into that bench, and there is quite a bit of evidence of remodeling and probably indicating that that structure served that community for a long time. So when that structure was initially excavated and put into use, the floor, it looks like it was probably the raw caliche floor. And there are several features that have not yet been dug, but we can see them sort of packed in the surface. And those look like probably the most important one is a large rectangular vault. So if people are familiar with Rich Wilshusen's work about complex CPAPUs in late Basket Maker 3 and early P1, it looks like we may have one of those features in this early Great Kiva. There's a couple other small clay-lined pits in that initial floor. That floor was capped over with a beautiful red plaster, sealed everything over the top, and a different type of CPAPU was integrated into the new plaster floor. And that is a double pit sand-filled CPAPU. We are seeing this same feature configuration in most of our pit houses. So especially the pit houses on the southern side of the site seem to have 2 small pits inwards in the structure from the hearth, and those are always filled with sand, usually different colored sand. So we see that actually built into the floor of the Great Kiva. After that, there was another floor that was built on top of it. So major remodeling, and they actually created a sand floor. So this is a floor that's 7 centimeters thick in places, probably manufactured sand. So they're probably taking local sandstone, smashing it, grinding it, and actually creating this beautiful consistent sand floor of different colors. In some places it's a beautiful golden brown, it's greenish in other places, and even a red color in others. So very thick, sand floor, and then lots of burning evident on that floor. So small diameter material, mostly sage, twigs, brush, sort of incorporated into that upper layer of the sand. And on that surface was probably the largest assemblage that we had in the Great Kiva, and that was about 500 items lying on the floor, most of which were broken and smashed vessels. So those included seed jars, so little globular jars, wide neck jars, and cheap and black on white bowls. The interesting part is probably 85% of those vessels are actually fugitive red on the outside, so they've got a nice iron oxide pigment on the exterior. So yeah, it's beautiful to turn a cheap and black on white vessel over and have this gorgeous blood red color on the outside. I don't think that this assemblage is refuse. It is a scatter of broken items, but it's such a consistent layer across the Great Kiva. I doubt that it's a random trash assemblage. And we've got other items that indicate that it's probably purposeful. And those are several projectile points. Some are sitting on benches, some are sitting on floors. One of them is an archaic point that's been salvaged and put into the floor of the Great Kiva. We also have beads, quite a few beads coming from that floor, and that just may be a sign of activity. After that assemblage was laid down, we actually have one more ephemeral floor built over the top of this. And this is a deposit of construction material about 10 centimeters deep. And on that surface, there was a major burning event. So I'm seeing that as probably part of the decommissioning of the building, and the entire floor is oxidized, and it looks like they might have been trying to light that roof on fire. They never quite accomplished that. They charred some of the larger beams, but they never really got a real conflagration going in that structure. We have just done a preliminary round of pollen analysis on the floors of this Great Kiva, and there's just a couple things that I think are interesting to point out. That final floor, that burned floor, the pollen that's coming back is really indicative of a weedy, probably very impacted environment. So lots of quinoams, grasses, other weedy material, very, very small signature of corn. So probably at a point where the environment around that structure has been impacted. We actually have an archaeomagnetic date off that burned floor, and it is 700 AD, plus or minus 30 years. So that is really our capping date for the site. All of the other structures date before that, and that may be our closing date at the structure, is that final event in the Great Kiva. The lower floors, that sand floor that I was talking about, also came back with really interesting pollen evidence, and a lot of that is indicating wetland species in the area. So we've got everything from rose family, cattail, so there's cattail showing up in there. There's a little bit of corn, but also the most surprising is birch, and that might actually be a marsh birch. So if you envision this, we have, this site is sitting up top of the McElmo Dome, whereas there is not really running surface water, and what we have is a loess-covered environment. There is not, we don't have seeps, we don't have springs, no surface water, and yet we have all of this evidence of wetland material on that sand floor. We have a couple options. Either people are bringing wetland species onto that floor, and it's a sign of actual activity there, or we have underestimated how wet and warm that period in the 600s was. So there's a chance that we're really looking at a major environmental shift during Basket Maker 3. And I'll throw out the third option too, is that there's a possibility that people are actually undertaking landscape works and building sort of wetland environments near their homes. So pretty interesting stuff going on in the Great Kiva. Again, we're not quite finished at this point, but we're getting there. So, you know, at this point, I think we might be able to say that the Dillard settlement sure looks like it may be colonizing farmers moving into the southwest Colorado, and that structure in particular may serve a larger settlement around the area than just the Dillard site proper for the next century. So again, we've got a couple more years to go, and we'll keep